Boba Fett. Do you have an appointment?
Welcome to ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy, and let's talk about all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things that you might have missed in the Book of Boba Fett, Chapter 2. And the second half of this episode was some of the best Star Wars that I have ever seen, and I can't wait to talk about it. The episode begins with Fennec Shand escorting her prisoner to Jabba's old palace, and passing through this giant gate. Now this, of course, mirrors the journey taken by C-3PO and R2-D2 in Return of the Jedi. When the prisoner is brought before Boba, he lets out a Huttese curse. And we've heard this curse numerous times throughout Star Wars, and I believe the first time was here.
Nice to see a familiar face. Ichuta. How rude.
Now I hope we don't get demonetized for language, because in Huttese, that phrase is pretty salty. It roughly means taking a its insides come out, and then you where it's like. The assassin is part of the Order of the Night Wind, a group that we've never heard of before, for good reason. Fennec says,
"Overpriced. You're paying for the name."
Which made me laugh because you hear the same criticism of luxury items like Apple products, Cadillacs, and your mom. But in the case of the Night Wind, she's right. This guy was kind of a pushover. They sent him into the Rancor pit, going down the same slide that Luke did in Jedi, and Boba's throne still moves to the edge of the gate just like Jabba's did. Now we know that the original Rancor isn't in there because Luke killed it. But in the last episode, Fennec hinted that Jabba had a menagerie. And in the Bad Batch, we saw Jabba purchase a young Rancor named Muchi. So I really thought that we might see a backup Rancor here, meaning that I would also make a bad assassin who's fooled by her bluff.
It's empty.
Now I did like the attention to detail here, that this is the same gate that Luke tries to get through after he runs through the Rancor's legs. Now I am going to repeat a few Easter eggs that I mentioned in our last video because, I don't know, this might be your first time watching a ScreenCrush video. And if it is, welcome, we're glad that you're here. This droid is called 8D8, and he was the torture droid that we saw in Return of the Jedi. And here he's voiced by the brilliant Matt Berry.
You're a woman.
Yes, I hope that's not a problem.
The title of the episode is The Tribes of Tatooine, and it has a few different meanings. First of all, it refers to the many tribes of Tuskens that we learn about later in the episode. But also the many warring syndicates and political interests that Boba Fett must now negotiate through.
Running a family is more complicated than bounty hunting.
But also, the last episode was titled Stranger in a Strange Land, a phrase that Moses used to describe himself in the book of Exodus, after he left the Egyptian court to be with his fellow Israelites. In our last video, I pointed out the many similarities between the first episode and the story of Moses. If this theme is deliberate, then another reference here could be to the 12 tribes of Israel, who Moses united and led out of bondage. The first half of the episode returns to Mos Espa, hometown of Anakin Skywalker.
I was born in a small town.
As they walk through the city, we see lots of Trandoshans, maybe because they're lizards and they like the heat. But we see them around town a lot, like those old men that sit on the corner in your neighborhood. The brilliant improviser Dave Pasquesi plays the mayor's Twi'lek majordomo, and he says,
However, I did not see your litter arrive.
He's referring to a chair or platform that lords and ladies would be carried on by their slaves, and this ancient custom appeared in nearly every corner of the earth, wherever rich people were taking advantage of the poor. The mayor is an Ithorian, nicknamed a Hammerhead like we first saw in the Mos Eisley Cantina. Now his name is Mok Shaiz, and if he's the same Hammerhead from the Cantina in A New Hope, then he's had quite a journey. He used to steal cars, then he was a barback, now he's on the right track. But for Boba Fett, that is not an option. I cannot say that with more clarity. Boba Fett has come a long way since he fell into the Sarlacc, but unlike his dad Jango, Boba has lost all his hair. Someone must have told Jango that the best way to prevent hair loss was to start when you still have hair left, and that is why I use Keeps, the sponsor of this video. There's a history of hair loss in my family, so when my hair started to thin, I didn't waste any time. So believe me, if your hair is starting to thin, don't put this off. Start using Keeps now. Treatments can take up to 4 to 6 months or more to see results, so it's important to act fast. And you'll need to start early and stick with it. The sooner you start using Keeps, the more hair you'll save. It's even proven to work on a clone scalp.
I intend to rule with respect.
Keeps has more 5-star reviews than any of its competitors, and hundreds of thousands of men trust Keeps for their hair loss prevention medication. So if you're noticing that you're losing your hair, do something about it. For a limited time, go to keeps.com/ScreenCrush or click the link in the description to get 50% off your first order. Back to the Easter eggs. The mayor is voiced by Robert Rodriguez, executive producer of the show and director of episode 1, and he says,
The Order of the Night Wind are not allowed to operate outside of hut space.
So this might confuse some of you more casual Star Wars fans.
Yeah, didn't Jabba the Hutt die in Return of the Jedi?
Well, yes, Doug, he did, but Jabba was not the only Hutt. There's actually a council of Hutts that controls a huge section of the underworld, but Jabba was the most powerful and feared of them all. Boba mentions that he killed Bib Fortuna, Jabba's old major domo, who was probably ruling Tatooine as a proxy for the Hutts after Jabba died. The mayor's most telling line is this:
Running a family is more complicated than bounty hunting.
So this is actually the thrust of the show. Boba Fett learning how to run a crime family and to navigate difficult political situations. They return to Garsa's sanctuary, which is being run by Jennifer Beals from Flashdance. Inside the sanctuary, we see an alien called a Chadra Fan, much like Cabe, this alien that we saw in the cantina from A New Hope. And as we pointed out in the last episode, Max Rebo survived the destruction of the sail barge to form a Jizz trio with Figrin Dan, that's the Bith from A New Hope, and this drum machine. And before you get salty in the comments, Jizz is actually the name of the music that they were playing in A New Hope. For real. And this droid is called R3X from the Star Tours ride and Galaxy's Edge theme park, where he now has a career as a DJ. Boba says,
Now you're sweating like a Gumpton Mustafar.
Now, a Gumta, I don't know what that is. My guess is it's some kind of ice creature, because Mustafar is where Obi-Wan fought Anakin, and Darth Vader later built his palace here. Now, I wonder if Boba knows Mustafar so casually because he did contract work for Vader and he had to report to his palace. Then he mentions Nal Hutta. This is the homeworld of the Hutts in the center of their criminal empire. Then we see Jabba's cousins, the Sackville Hutts, come to claim Bag End and the rest of his territory. Now, they are being carried on a litter, even though there are anti-gravity machines that could easily carry them along. Because this way, they're making a statement that they have the power to force people to carry them around. Also, if they're Jabba's cousins, then they may be the children of Zero the Hutt, the Truman Capote sound-alike who is high in the running for worst Star Wars character ever.
I like the sound of that.
And their litter comes with a little snack bowl, just like the one where Jabba kept his frogs in Jedi. Dave Smiler on Twitter pointed out that this creature the Hutt uses as a handkerchief tries to bite him for revenge. Again, it's a nice way of showing how the Hutts use people for their own pleasure. The font for the subtitles is the same that was used in the original trilogy, which is a very cool detail and makes continuity with those movies. Then the twins unveil their secret weapon, a badass Wookiee bounty hunter named Black Kursatan from the comics. Now in the comics, we saw that this Wookiee worked for Jabba the Hutt. One time he even kidnapped Uncle Owen, thinking that he was someone else, and then he fought Obi-Wan Kenobi. He also worked with the comic character Dr. Aphra, and he's just an all-around badass. I cannot wait to see him fight in this show. Now, Boba Fett sees him and dismisses him as a gladiator from the Death Pits of Dur, and we actually saw him in a fighting pit in Darth Vader issue 7. And Boba Fett would know this Wookiee's backstory because the two of them used to work together until Darth Vader hired them for separate jobs. Finnick points out that Boba Fett will need permission to kill the Hutts, which is the space equivalent of being made in the Mafia. I'm a maker! And then we get to the really good part of the episode. Just as in the present day, Boba Fett has to navigate his rise to the top of the Tatooine underworld, in the past, he had to rise through the tribe of Tusken Raiders. Now, when he's healing in the Bacta tank, the sound effect matches when Han Solo was taken out of Carbonite in Return of the Jedi. This could be because both machines are made with Hutt technology that was available inside the palace. And then we see him learning to fight with a training gaffy stick. Very similar to when you learn to use a sword. You have to use a wooden practice sword, so the weight is similar to a real sword, but it's not as deadly.
It's too heavy.
It is heavy as it needs to be to make you strong.
Notice that now other people are digging for black melons while he trains, showing that his standing in the tribe has been elevated. Now I could be wrong, but I think this creature they flesh out is a bubo. We saw one of these in front of Jabba's palace in Jedi. And the lizard dogs with the Tuskens are called massifs, and of course we see their banthas, and later a whole herd of these creatures. And the sign language that Fett uses is how we saw Din Djarin communicate with the Tuskens in The Mandalorian. Then we see a space train run by the Pike Syndicate. This is one of the galaxy's top 3 crime syndicates along with the Hutts and the Black Sun. Now we've seen them before in the Clone Wars and in Solo. In Solo, they operated the spice mines of Kessel, and here they are running spice. This episode actually resolves a glaring continuity error from that movie. that the Pikes look completely different of how they appeared in the animated shows? Well, I guess the answer is they were just wearing masks. Now, this is all very interesting because if Jabba was alive, there is no way the Pikes would be running spice on Tatooine. This is another example of the balance of power shifting after the Battle of Endor. The Outer Rim has become more lawless as criminal factions are all vying for control. I mean, it really kind of makes you wish that Episode 7 would have been about the fledgling New Republic fighting off a resurgent criminal empire instead of a remake of New Hope. Oh well. The Tuskens immediately fire at the train because it's run by off-worlders, and we saw them employ this same attitude, shooting at the pods in the Phantom Menace. Now, in some of the reviews that I've read of the first episode of Boba Fett, critics were asking why he suddenly wants to rule the underworld. These flashbacks are answering that question. He's seen the lawlessness that affects the people's lives on Tatooine, and he thinks that he can do better. And rather than gain power through fear, he wants to earn respect, just as he earned the respect of the Tuskens. And I love how we're learning more about the Tuskens and their culture. In A New Hope, they were scary desert people, the other, more like how Native Americans were portrayed in classic westerns. But now we're learning their customs and humanizing them. It's fascinating to watch. And then we see a Nikto biker gang terrorizing a bar. Now, the channel Heavy Spoilers pointed out that this looks an awful lot like Tosche Station. Now, we actually have seen Tosche Station before in a boring deleted scene from A New Hope, where Luke is hanging out with his friends. And two of those friends are Cammy and Fixer, the same couple that appears in this episode. Now, I made a mistake in our last video when I said these were the Red Key Raiders terrorizing a moisture farm. The Red Key Raiders is the group that Cobb Vanth fought off in Season 2 of The Mandalorian. But the group terrorizing the moisture farm is actually this biker gang, and you can see their symbol on the speeders. I like that they're even wearing biker gang colors that we would see in real life. The Arabesh letters on the back read Tatooine, and it kind of looks like the colors hold the symbol of a hut. And I also love that the game in Tosche Station was very retro and very 80s, so it fits in with the technology that we see in the original trilogy. The whole scene is a tried and true Western trope where the big mean gang comes into town, beats up a guy in front of his woman, and then the gunslinger comes in to clean up the mess. This whole sequence is very revealing for Boba Fett's character. He could have escaped, but he is a man of honor.
A man got to have a code.
This same code of honor is why Fennec is loyal to him after he saved her life in the desert. Now, the binoculars the Tuskens use look exactly like the ones that Luke owned in A New Hope. I'm actually wondering if they stole them right here when they almost killed him. After all, these scenes do all take place on the Dune Sea. And this whole train sequence is unreal. It is the best Star Wars action scene since, I think, Rogue One's climax. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I mean, it's incredible. And by the way, the Arabesh letters in the conductor car here spell out boost. The episode's director was Steph Green, and she also directed my favorite episode of The Watchmen, Little Fear of Lightning. She's an amazing talent, and I can't wait to see what she makes next. So this whole sequence of an outsider helping the tribesmen to raid a train is lifted directly from a thrilling sequence in Lawrence of Arabia. In that movie, Lawrence tries and fails to unite the many tribes on the Arabian Peninsula.
Spoilers!
It's not spoilers, it's history. Read a book. Now, I wonder if we'll see something similar here, with Boba Fett trying to help the Tuskens overcome their differences and all unite against the Offworlders. And this train robbery is also a Western trope, appearing in classics like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and 3:10 to Yuma. When the Pikes are taken prisoner, Boba sits on a crate, a kind of makeshift throne. Again, these flashbacks are showing us why he wants to be a crime lord and sit on the throne of Jabba the Hutt. Expect the flashbacks to continue to mirror directly what's happening in the present day. For instance, Blue Bantha Milk on Twitter pointed out that he is robed in this episode just as he's armored in episode 1. During his questioning, he mentions the spice mines of Kessel that we saw in Solo, and he name drops Anchorhead, the spaceport Luke talked about in A New Hope.
Look, I can take you as far as Anchorhead.
And he tells him to walk single file, as is Tusken custom.
Sand people always ride single file to hide their numbers.
Afterwards, the Tusken chief tells Boba that Tatooine once had oceans that dried up. And guess what? This is actually from the old expanded universe stories that Disney decanonized when they bought Lucasfilm. Tatooine was once a lush world that was enslaved by people called the Rakatan. The people of Tatooine rebelled, and then the Rakatan responded by bombarding the planet so much that it destroyed their ecosystem. And then the chief sends Boba on a vision quest, another Native American cultural ritual that's been reinterpreted here. Some tribes in the western United States would consume peyote to have their visions, kind of like when Homer Simpson ate that spicy pepper.
Goo goo gajoob.
I can relate to this face that Boba makes because it's me literally every time I take a COVID test. So let's talk about Boba's vision because it's actually the impetus for everything that he does later in the show. The Dune Sea becomes the Sea of Camino, his boyhood home. The tree growing from the water is the literal tree that he takes the wood from, but it also represents his family tree. Where his roots are. You'll notice that there are two trees, a small one representing young Boba Fett, and then a large one representing his father Jango Fett and his father's profession, bounty hunting. The tree's fruit are the eyes of Jawas, who stripped his armor and left him for dead, the people who took his family heritage away from him. Now the tree, which represents his family and his past, begins to consume him, as the Sarlacc consumed him. So these two scenes are intercut together. Then there are flashes of the aftermath of the Battle of Geonosis when he holds his father's helmet in his hands, except now he sees his own reflection in the helmet. Now remember, he has the same face as his father, so he's seen himself in his father's place, dead inside the helmet. It's a way of saying that the ways of his father, of being a bounty hunter, will lead him to the same end. Just as his family tree is consuming him, he will also be consumed by his family's legacy of violence. We see young Boba watching his father's ship fly away and him chasing after it, a way of saying that his father is gone forever and he must honor his father by finding a new way. Instead of being a copy of Jango Fett and also being a bounty hunter, he has to grow and evolve into something else, the ruler of his own empire. When he emerges from his vision, this shot is also very reminiscent of Lawrence of Arabia, and much like Roy Hobbs, he has a piece of wood to carve his weapon from.
And here it is.
Wow.
Afterwards, he becomes fully initiated, also giving off strong parallels to the movie Dances with Wolves, where a white cavalry officer joins the Sioux Nation. The Tuskens do a ceremonial dance, and this is also a custom in many native tribes. But Tamura Morrison is a New Zealander of Maori descent, and this could be a tribute to their ceremonial dance, the Haka. Thanks What Did I Miss 6 on Twitter for that observation. Well, that's all the Easter eggs that I found, but if you guys found any, let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.